Hey everybody, welcome to the Counterpoise podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Malik Foster, and I'm joined by my other co-hosts today.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Everett Stevenson, one of the co-hosts of the Counterpoise Pod, the infamous Counterpoise Podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm your third co-host. My name is Samantha Adams, and we have a very interesting topic to discuss today. Now, y'all know we are all about offering new perspective and uplifting Black folks. So today is befitting that we go ahead and get into it. Today we are talking about affirmative action. And so one of the things that we wanted to discuss was whether or not affirmative action should actually be abolished. And so I guess what we can do is just kind of dive right in. So I know that, so let's start off with this. Let's define the purpose of affirmative action. The purpose of affirmative action was created by the federal government as some sort of a remedy, right? It was to help remedy discrimination, mostly against Black people, right? Because what was going on, and it still goes on today, people are being discriminated against when they're applying for things like jobs, education, things like that, things that can help grow them. And so the purpose of affirmative action was to create a space where these organizations were required to have Black people there. So they had to fulfill a certain level status quo in order to make sure that they met these certain guidelines. And in order for the federal government to be able to implement, affirmative action, these industries had to receive federal funding, which is why I was talking about things like school, right? So if John, let's say John Jones wants to go to a state college, right? And it's all white, and he's Black. Affirmative action would require that state school to give him consideration so that he cannot be discriminated against. And then there's a level of diversity that has to happen within that institution. So sometimes they have a quota that they have to meet. Like maybe you have to have 3%, maybe you have to have 5%, whatever that quota is of diversity. The percentage points of people that come from a different diverse makeup. So like, let's say, when you look at the inclusion of what's the percentage of Black people that go to that school? What's the percentage of Asian people? What's the percentage of women, right? Things like that. Those are some of the things and reasons why affirmative action exists. And so there have been a lot of case laws and things like that have happened throughout the years to try to remedy those issues. However, there are also people that are completely against affirmative action. They believe that, you should be able to get there on your own, period. And so the issue, I think, that comes from, especially when it's pertaining to race, is whether or not I would be able to get there on my own, but for the fact that I'm Black. Like if you take me and you take my name off my resume and you take somebody else and some white person that has similar experience, or maybe not, maybe they don't have similar experience. You take my name off, or you take their name off, and you just look at my application, the information I provided, my grades, all of that. Am I going to get selected? And if I'm not selected, why not? Am I not being selected because the candidate that they did choose was actually better than me? Or did they select the other person because they're white? So that's some of the reasons why, we had that affirmative action even existed in the first place. So I wanted to just
I also think that too, like another thing that I wanted to add on to that as well was, like you said, the historical viewpoints of the disadvantagements that, occurred within the community. And that's one of the reasons that, certain institutions have offered to provide, these type of benefits for certain citizens. And like you said, whether it be in the education, in particular in the disparity in which there has been, but also I think they take into consideration not only just the fact that, the numbers count isn't diverse. I think another thing that they look at is too, just the institutional disadvantages that have plagued a lot of people within these and I say these, even though ideally it was kind of fought for by the by well, Black Americans who fought for the civil rights movement, which kind of helped bring about a lot of this stuff. But some of the different disadvantages that they may have had. So when we talk about, education as one in particular, you can look at how certain schools may not have access to the same type of books coming up. So that in turn may have issues with them having certain educational, I don't want to say backgrounds, but having a certain educational type of advantages when it goes towards doing standardized testing. And then those things also play a role into getting into certain institutions. So offsetting all of those type of issues, this is one of the things that, certain institutions or organizations have chosen to do to try to combat those problems that some communities have faced.
Yeah, I was going to add on a little bit to some of the background. So I just find it kind of ironic that, that there's a group of Asians, the Asian community is bringing forth a lawsuit, I believe out of North Carolina, to the federal court, outlining that, affirmative action should be struck down because the reason is being that their test scores are higher and they feel like they're letting in people with lower test scores over them. So they feel like that they're being excluded. Although, as my co-host alluded to and explained, that affirmative action was specifically designed for some of the mistreatments in the education sector of this country, because Black people were denied proper education in various ways, from laws on the books like, hey, you can't read, laws on the books of not being able to go to certain schools, not be able to advance themselves, the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality of, hey, slavery is abolished, there you go. But that wasn't just the only thing that needed to be remedied, right? There is the education section of the separate but equal, right? But it wasn't separate but equal, it was separate and unequal when, the government's allocating resources to one community and lacking the resources to the other community. In the public school system, that creates a disparity there as well. So it's deeper than just test scores. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of some of the background on the case, brief little short summary. You guys want to add on to that, or we can move on to some of the arguments?
We can go ahead and move on to some of the...
Yeah, no, I definitely wanted to add in a little bit more on the history real quick too, because this North Carolina case isn't necessarily just the first time that we've seen this happen. I think originally one of the first issues, and we've seen these cases being brought, was in California. I think that was one of the first states that had to deal with that, and especially within. And we talk about education because a lot of the times that we see this occur is the factoring skills within universities when they're taking into consideration the different types of makeups that their student body may have, and the type of backgrounds that they may come from, and the initiatives that they have or that they may be a part of when they look to build up their student body. California was one, and then Michigan I also know was another one, and there may have been a couple of other states as well, but now we've seen most recently North Carolina as a state. And so I just wanted to kind of reference that this isn't necessarily one of the first cases that happened. There is a little bit of precedent for this issue in particular, and those are two states in which it was struck down on prior to this North Carolina case.
Well, I think it even goes back further than that, right? Because there have been issues with regards to diversity in universities, like we've been saying all along for quite some time, and it all stems from Jim Crow laws, where Black folks, it's not just about being separate but unequal, which Malik was talking about, which also was a Jim Crow law. There are a whole lot of other things. And even today, right, when you start talking about education, that's when you have to start talking about voting and redistricting and redlining, because the way that funds are allocated are based on how these districts are created. And when we're talking about education, it's not only at the grade school level, you see it more often at the collegiate level. And so it's important to recognize that when you're talking about trying to right these wrongs and clear out the disparities in treatment, it's important to recognize how, where did these things come from? Because you can't fix something unless you know where it comes from. Now, one of the things I wanted to say was Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is one of those justices that was able to benefit from affirmative action throughout his life and career, but he is completely against it. He is completely against affirmative action because he feels like people should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I'm not going. I can tell you I don't agree. Right? You can't use a system and benefit from it and then say nobody else is allowed to use it. That's just my personal opinion.
I was gonna say an argument that Clarence Thomas does make on this point, which I kind of get what he's saying, right? He's saying, like, what is diversity if everything is diverse? He's basically saying, like, arguing that it should be struck down because it's not even being designed, it's not even being applied what it originally was designed to do, right? Like, everybody's being allowed. You got white women being allowed, and if you're a different group, if you're a homosexual white man, like, there's no category. It's basically almost no category of person that's excluded. Like, everybody can get excluded under a certain circumstance. So no one's really being excluded from affirmative action based off of the way it is, and that's one of the points he was outlining in some of the arguments.
Yeah, but that comes from having a misconception that everything is in fact already diverse, and it's not. Like, when they said, okay, no, let's desegregate everything, right? They still would segregate, which is why the federal government has had to step in the first place to even create these rules, so that they can stop, being prejudiced and keeping things segregated and keeping things. So, all right, let me back up. When you talk about things like jurisdiction, right? So for our people that are watching, you have to understand, you have essentially two different jurisdictions. You have the federal jurisdiction and you have the state jurisdiction, right? And when you have the federal jurisdiction has jurisdiction and power over certain things, okay? State has power over everything that happens with the state. When the two don't agree, and the state's rules go past what the federal government says. So if the federal government says stop at 2 and they want to go at 3, you can't do that because the federal government's rules are gonna supersede. It's called the supremacy clause to the Constitution, okay? So when the federal government said, hey, we're gonna give these states money for different things, roads, schools, all kinds of stuff, right? And when you do that, when we give that money, we have the power and control to dictate certain aspects of how things go based on the fact that we give money, right? And it's a lot more complex than that, but that's just like the overarching thing of how it works, okay? When desegregation took place, and especially of schools, Black people were still being segregated against, regardless of the fact that desegregation was actually a rule, especially in the South, right? So the federal government had to step in and say, listen, now, because y'all didn't do what we said the rule was, now y'all need to meet a quota because you all aren't doing what we told you to do. So as it relates to that, we have to put this thing in place just because you won't follow what we said. With regards to saying, why do you need affirmative action to diversify something that's already diverse, I think is out of touch because you can't say that things are all diverse. It's diverse because of affirmative action. It's not diverse without it.
That wasn't the argument, Sam.
Okay.
Well, guys, I just want to go ahead real quick and clarify a couple of things real fast. One of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about was just going into it. There's actually been 9 states who have struck down, race-based affirmative action. It was California who was the first to do it in 96. Washington did it in 98. Florida did it in 99. Michigan did it in 06. Nebraska did it in 08. Arizona did it in 2010. New Hampshire did it in 2012. Oklahoma did it in 2012. And most notably was Idaho, who did it in 2020.
Go ahead, Molly.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good list. I do think, I think, affirmative action is a trick bag. Like if it's including everybody, I don't think it's designed for its original intent, which was to help Black people specifically. So I think it does need to be struck down, and I think it does need to be do away with, and something new needs to be in place of it, or just get rid of it, because I don't think it's really applicable if other people are using it more than Black people and benefiting from it more.
And unfortunately, that's been the case in some regards. I think one of the things that you can look at would be another way that it goes into play and outside of the educational standpoint is when we look at government funding for things that Sam brought up for contracts. A lot of times there have been certain points that were allocated to individuals who may be minority-owned businesses. Now, to technically qualify as a minority-owned business, generally, from the early standpoint of it, it would have looked to be like, okay, someone from a minority, like a different race-based type of mindset. But then that also included female-owned businesses, that also included, like you said, maybe a gay-owned business or a business that may be owned by someone who identifies as being gay. So those things started to span out. So even like you said, which is kind of weird that they're being brought about it, but an Asian individual will be able to bring the standpoint that they are a minority in a sense, because again, the majority race in this country has been, white Caucasian. So it's just kind of funny because everybody kind of can't fit into this bag, and then it's only when the bag doesn't work for you and you feel like someone else is getting in that it starts to become a problem. So I just want to kind of bring that.
So Malik, I wanted you to elaborate on where I was wrong about what about the argument with regards to pulling people up by your bootstraps is concerned.
Oh, well, the argument is what he's trying to say is that it's including everybody. So he doesn't know what diversity is. If it's is it really diverse? If you're just including everybody. He doesn't know what diversity is. So when the universities are speaking from a point of view of we want to be more inclusionary and diverse, the university that's saying okay, we have just one group of people and we're trying to include different groups of people. But if it's just including everybody anyway, why do you really need this affirmative action? Because it's doing what it's originally designed to do. And he doesn't know what diversity is because it's including just everybody.
So I think the problem is it doesn't include everybody, right? I think that's right there is where the issue is. It does not include everybody, but it does include when you're talking about race-based affirmative action, it doesn't include all races. No, because it doesn't include white people. right? It includes quote unquote people of
It
color.
does include white people
Hold
if
on, let me
you put it
finish what
under
I'm
a
saying.
certain
Let me finish what I'm saying. Let
category.
me finish what I'm saying. Like, let me finish what I'm saying.
Go ahead. I just
So, I
let
mean,
that know.
the only white people it might include is white women, right? So at that point, but I'm talking about race based. I'm not talking about gender. I'm not talking
In
about.
some instances, but go
Just let
ahead.
me finish. I'm talking about race based. You're talking about race based. Yeah, it's going to include Asians. Yeah, it's going to include Africans and people of African descent. Yeah, it's gonna include all of these different. It's gonna include people of Hispanic descent, right? So yeah, it's gonna include all of them. So to a degree, I get it, right? If you want it to be specifically just for Black people, make it just for people of African descent. Period. You have to be clear because in every law, every single law that this country has just about that relates to anything related to civil rights, everybody else has been able to ride the coattails of. That's everything. Whether you're talking about desegregation, if you're talking about small business loans, you're talking about everything. Everybody else always jumps on the backs of the civil rights movement, and Black people still get pushed to the bottom. But the purpose of it was for Black people, right? So I agree to that extent, but I do not agree that everybody, like a white man, the only way a white man can benefit from affirmative action is if he's trying to go into a majority Black place, like a HBCU. You see what I'm saying? And even then, because that's a private institute, those are private institutions. You don't see that happening very often. It's not a requirement. So that's the reason why I say I don't agree with Clarence Thomas. Do I think that maybe it could be narrowed? Absolutely, but it doesn't mean it needs to be abolished. That's my opinion.
Well, I was just going to say, well, there's still situations where white men can utilize affirmative action. So it's not completely like
I
they're
just
not
said that.
completely excluded entire of the rule. Like the rule isn't exclusionary. Like it's not specific enough, and any and everybody can in some way take advantage of the policies.
I just said that. I think that you and I are saying the same thing, but I think that how you get there is where we differ, right? Because I believe you can just narrow the scope of affirmative, the rule that already exists as it relates to affirmative action, right? As opposed to abolishing it completely and creating something totally new. You abolish it completely, create something totally new, and then more people are going to be able to benefit off the new thing. So if you just go ahead and you narrow what's already in existence, then we can go ahead and just move forward.
No, I just think you got to get rid of it and make it specifically for its
I know that. I know
intention,
that. That's
which
what you're
is
saying. But you and
that's
I are saying different. You and I are saying different things in that regard. What you're saying is get rid of it, create something else. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is narrow the thing that we already have. You see what I'm saying? Make it. Make it
I
so
don't know
that it
how you
doesn't.
can narrow it without changing it. Like I don't know how you can do
That's
that.
what you do. You change it, but you don't have to get rid of it and create something new. You see what I'm saying? You change it, you amend it,
That
you
would
do
be
whatever.
changed. But Sam, that would be making something new if you
No, it's
alter it.
not.
Yeah, because you would have to, well, in order for it to work the way I feel like it should work, you would have to change it and make a totally different rule because right now it's like, oh, anybody faced any discrimination or minorities based off of race, obviously not white males, straight white males. That's like the only group that it kind of excludes, but even white males can kind of take advantage of it. Maybe not straight white males, but in like some cases, like you said, they can even take advantage of it. So it's not really exclusionary at all. You have to totally change it.
Well, I think on this topic, like I'm going to have to agree that I think that you don't necessarily have to
No,
abolish
I
the
think I
rule per
think that
se,
I think
but I think that you can limit it. You can, limit
right.
the enforcement of it or how it's being applied. And so, meaning that, like, we don't
Right.
necessarily mean that we're going to have to go back and vote on certain issues or this, that, and the third. If it's already on the books, which you know how hard it was very much to get that and to get Congress to agree on anything that may be beneficial towards, and particularly the Black community, to try to go back and ask, it would be a big ask for them to go back and do. I think we look at the fact that the George Floyd bill was something that we talked about that was taking forever. I think the anti-lynching bill was another one that took forever and a day to even get to see the light of day. So to go back and ask them to redo it completely would be a super monumentous task. But I think to ask the courts to maybe, or excuse me, either the courts and or the legislators to go back into to define or to reinterpret how this should be applied may be a better move, because again, it doesn't take it off the books and then have to rework, rewrite, have meetings, have groups, have hearing sessions, have think tanks. I think we've seen that happen again when we talked about reparations. Or we'll put for a study for a think tank for us to see exactly what the effect is. Okay, well, you know what the effect is. You know exactly how this country was built. You know exactly what things that occurred in order for this country to be built. How are you going to remedy it now? And I think that's what would happen if we take it off the book and then ask for it to necessarily come back as a whole new rule. I do agree that I think that both things can be accomplished, where you can have the same law be applied more specifically to certain individuals, and then you can get the same type of results that I think we're all looking for.
Right. So that's essentially that's pretty much what I'm saying. Exactly what you just said, E. But I want to add one thing, and that's with regards to changes. Our government amends laws all the time. They amend bills all the time. They don't get rid of them and then create new ones. They can gut it completely, but they don't get rid of it. You see what I'm saying? And that's what I mean by that. I don't think they need to get rid of it and create something completely new. They need to take what already exists and change it. And all it changes is an amendment. But it would require so much, because the anti-lynching bill passed, right? It took like 50 something years for that thing to pass. And the George Floyd bill still hasn't passed. That thing is still sitting out there waiting for somebody to do something. And now that these elections just went by, that ain't about to happen no time soon, because the Republicans won the majority. So, and most Republicans.
But I don't think y'all can just say that and blame the Republicans, because like,
not blaming the Republicans.
The Asians got their anti-hate bill passed. Like, other groups get stuff passed. When it comes to us,
right,
we're specifically target, and
right. But you got to look at the whole
non-neglect policy is towards us. So that
but you got to look at the whole picture. Who had the majority with the anti-Asian hate bill? I mean, anti-hate bill against Asians. I can't remember what it's called. When that happened, look who was in power, right? So now the scales have tipped. The Democrats no longer have the majority. Republicans do. And traditionally, Republicans are not for things like police reform. You see what I'm saying? Hold on, let me finish. The police reform is embedded in the George Floyd bill. So when you're talking about making these certain types of changes that can help benefit Black people, you have to look at how each party who's in the majority at that time typically votes and how things move when that happens. Joe Biden had 2 years to go ahead and make sure that George Floyd bill passed, but he didn't. They didn't do anything about it. They just let it sit there. You see what I'm saying? So now when you have Republicans who have been very vocal about being against the George Floyd bill, that thing is going to sit there until somebody does something. Now, when I say the Republicans, I don't mean each and every individual one, because of course there are going to be some that are for it. But in a general sense, no, they're not going to be for it. So it's going to sit there longer, just like the anti-lynching bill sat there for 51 years or 56 years or however long. So at the end of the day, when you're talking about affirmative action and making changes, you amend the bill. The bill already exists. Just like E said, it takes so long to get these things passed, especially for Black people. Like, in order to even get the civil rights bill passed, we had to tear up the whole country. Like, there was riots, marches, boycott. We had to go through all of that just so we can get some equity, so we can be kind of treated the same. And we still ain't. Here we are, all these years later, still being treated like we're not as important, despite the fact that this country still runs on the backs of the black dollar and the labor and everything that Black people continue to put into this country. So, I agree that affirmative action very well may need to be narrowed, but I don't agree that it needs to be tossed out and redone. It needs to just be restructured as is, and they can narrow the scope of where it is now. So.
Yeah, I just my little argument to like y'all saying that it needs to be redone and narrowed is like that bill, it would have to be substantially changed, like to the point where it's just something new, in my opinion. It's not just like a few things are taken out and amended. I think it would have to be substantially changed completely in order for, and that would make it something new, in my opinion. But I guess at that point we're arguing over semantics. And I think I can agree that, it being like substantially amended is a potential solution for the affirmative action or abolishment. Because when you look at it, if it's for basically these colleges and universities admissions, which is turning out to be a scam, that doesn't benefit Black people as a group anyway. So affirmative action, I think, doesn't even benefit Black people because Black people still have to pay those high tuition bills or get scholarships for these degrees that most of them are pretty much useless, and the schools are able to arbitrarily raise tuition with no limits, right? So it's up for the federal government to do something about that. These schools are getting away with crimes basically because as soon as the schools, the federal government took on loans, that just gave these institutions basically the go ahead to keep raising tuition and charging outrageous prices for their facilities and for their education. So I think that's one of the issues that come into play here, that even still, if affirmative action is specifically for just say Black people, for example, or even other, if it's narrowed in scope, I still don't think it benefits all Americans, right? At all. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I think I don't fully agree with that, but that's cool because that's your opinion. I think that when you're talking about solutions, I think narrowing the scope of it to benefit Black people is probably the best way to go about it. Just like you would anything else, for the simple fact that Black people don't have anything that's exclusive for Black people, except for probably the HBCU, right? And even then there's issues. And so I think in order for us to grow and to have more and better, I don't think getting rid of affirmative action would be a good idea at all, because I think that it would, especially in southern states, would quickly start to digress back to where we used to be. As far as tuition costs and all that happens for everybody. And I think, Malik, what you're talking about really goes more so towards reparations. So as opposed to just, how much school costs, things like that, I think that goes more so to reparations, where affirmative action is more about getting them in there in the first place. And I think that it does absolutely need to be fixed so that Black people receive benefit, and they could honestly just tie the two together. The affirmative action bill could be gutted in a way where it offers a form of reparations. It wouldn't be the sole source of reparations, but they honestly can do that in order to create a form. So I don't think it should be abolished. I think that it definitely should be reviewed and potentially restructured to a degree, because in essence, its purpose, I think, still would remain the same, but it just has to be a little bit more narrow. The scope of it needs to be more narrowed in order to benefit Black people, since that is the reason why it was created in the first place, Black people and women. And so those are the reasons why that bill, the affirmative action bill, was even created in the first place. Everett, did you have any solutions?
As far as solutions wise, no, I don't necessarily have anything in particular. I think that one, it definitely should be, and I mean, and even if we do it where we have something along the lines of like keeping it where there's different ones, that maybe there could be like a tier system, you know, and we kind of base it based off of, you know, the types of issues that different branches may have faced throughout the different times, and we give, you know, each one's different levels, different levels. I think that would be something that may be a little bit more favorable than as it currently stands. And so that would be something that I think that we could do. But off the rip, it is something that I think should be on the books, because again, there has been a lot of things that have generally has looked to have caused issues within allowing certain individuals within this country to be able to have access to excuse me, certain individuals within this company be able to have access to things such as education, things such as, you know, jobs, things such as housing as well.
Right. I just want to make another argument, like to kind of continue a little bit of my argument, and to kind of address something you said, Sam. Like the reason why I brought up the tuition and all of that stuff, because the whole point is to, you know, go into some of these higher level education places, and to get that quality education and have a fair shot at all different kind of universities. But it's kind of a scam, right? Where they're overcharging for tuition. And even if you are able to pay or get scholarships, most of the degrees are useless. So to me, it's like, okay, like what is designed for to help you get into these schools where you maybe generally you might not get in, but you get in based off of race and diversity initiatives. I still think it makes the university look good. They get the government money, and you're paying back, and you're hooked. So it's a real trick bag, in my opinion, for all Americans. And I think that's a hot butted issue, because they want, you know, to get rid of the student debt. And I think that kind of bolsters the argument here I'm trying to make on that front. But that's all I have to say on it as far as the arguments go.
Can I just respond to that really quickly? I think it's important to remember that when this is something that I was trying to explain before, so I'm going to say it a different way. Whenever you're talking about disproportionate treatment, right? There are certain things that you have to look at. And so I was trying to illustrate it without saying it, so this time I'm just going to say it. Whenever you evaluate whether or not you have two people that are similarly situated, meaning if you take the race out of it, you're looking at both of their things, their applications or whatever. Let's talk applications since we're talking about school. If they're similarly situated and you're picking one over the other because of race, then chances are that's discrimination. If you're looking at two people that are similarly situated and you pick a white person who's lesser qualified than a Black person that's more qualified, that is also discrimination. That's title, I believe it's Title VI or Title VII discrimination, right? So, you know, when you're looking at those types of things, the purpose of affirmative action was to remedy that, so that when you have somebody that's more qualified and Black, that they still get their seat at the table. And when you're talking about tuition, they don't give different tuition to different people. Like, if we all come in at the same time, we're all class of 2022, right? And we came in 4 years ago, our tuition is going to be the same, no matter if we're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. You see what I'm saying? That European, whatever, our tuition is the same. The cost of tuition is the same. It would be totally different if you're talking about, okay, white people have this tuition, Black people have this tuition, Asian people have this tuition, Hispanic people have this tuition. Then you have another problem. That's another problem. But that's the reason why I said we separate the tuition argument from the entry argument, because getting in is where affirmative action is used the most. Because, yeah, you're right. We do need to try to do something about the student loan debt. Yeah, most people go to college, get a degree, and they don't even use it. And so now they got all this debt and they're not even making use of why they acquired the debt in the first place. But at the same time, when you're talking about even just getting into college, it's about how you get in, right? And if I'm more qualified than Rebecca, right? And Rebecca's white, then I should be the one getting there. But not, and the color of my skin should have absolutely nothing to do with it. So that's what I mean about, when you're talking about having similarly situated people in a particular area. I think that, we really need to evaluate how we fix that. The solution that I propose is that you amend affirmative action. You amend it and you make it so that people, specifically Black people, are able to receive some type of benefit. As stated before, I also believe that it should be tied into some sort of reparations. There's more than one way to skin a cat when we talk about reparations. We've talked about it many, many times. And one of the ways that you can do that is offering maybe free tuition, right? So, but it's about how you get into school. So I think that we need to figure out better ways to make it so Black folks can actually get into school and not be discriminated against just because of the color of their skin, rather than their accomplishments. Because there's plenty of very well accomplished, very intelligent young people that are trying to get into school and can't, because if you do away with affirmative action, they wouldn't be able to get there just because they're Black, despite the fact that they may be graduating school summa cum laude, or maybe they're really, really active in school, or maybe they're really, really talented and have the ability to get scholarships and stuff, and even apply that to things like scholarships. So, I mean, those are some of the ways that I think that we can go ahead and resolve that issue. But at the end of the day, my final thoughts are that, we have to find a way to help Black people when it comes to affirmative action. I don't think getting rid of it is how we go about doing it, but I do think narrowing the scope so that it's more applicable and strengthen it so that it's for Black people. And so that's my final thought. And I don't think we should do away with affirmative action. You guys want to go ahead with your final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think that, there needs to be more of a directed measure towards making sure that the groups that mostly could benefit from it, the groups that are in most need of this type of rule should be able to be applicants of it, and beneficiaries of it. So that's something that I definitely think that we should look to have, and that, if it means that Congress may need to help by helping to narrow down the scope, if it means that they need to go to a tier system, or if it means that, universities need to continue, if their state has to strike it off, continue to hold it on their books, and in their judging schedule, I think that it definitely is something that needs to be there, because of the fact that this nation has had such a history of neglect within these certain types of groups. And it would be beneficiary for the country as a whole, to allow for certain groups to receive the adequate compensation, or not compensation, but adequate rules, I guess you will, or treatment that others unfairly have been able to receive throughout this country.
I'm saying opportunity, is that a better word?
Yeah. So I think a solution is, obviously, from my standpoint, to get rid of it, because I'm trying to think like, okay, even if you do amend it, is to get, and the whole purpose here was that the Asians are saying it's not fair because you're letting another race in to these schools over me, and it's showing that, even if Black Americans are let into these schools, it's not really being productive for them as a group, as a whole, because of the tuition and all the other effects these universities have, like the useless degrees and all this other stuff. Like, I'm not saying that universities and colleges cannot be useful, but the way the tuition is, the way the inflation is, where the situation is in the economy of this country, I don't think it's really ideal situation for most Black Americans to get involved in. So that the whole purpose is to be admitted to the school to get a better education so you can get a decent paying job. That's not what's going on anymore. That's not what's happening. So I think the whole purpose is null and void. Therefore, I think you cannot go ahead and abolish affirmative actions because it's not benefiting, Black Americans as a group, in my opinion. So to close us out here, before we conclude here, there's a few things that we would like to go over, which is the first is the book of the month. It's a Dr. Claude Anderson book. It's a Black History Reader, 101 questions you never thought to ask. So this is the fifth book in his installment series. It makes you think about the social construct that us as Black Americans live in this country and the economic engine that drove us to where we are today. So it deals with the social construct, the economic construct, and asks some different questions, and that he also answers to discover why Black people as a group are in the positions they are in today from a social perspective and from an economic perspective. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is a Black Business of the Month, which is a Black-owned bookstore out here in Atlanta for kids. Let me pull up the name here for you guys. It's braveandkindbooks.com. Once again, braveandkindbooks.com. And the reason why I chose this business is because we got to think about the youth, right? They need to be reading, educating themselves, and especially, by our own people, especially at a younger age, because Black people need positive imagery. Every group needs a positive image, and image is very important these days. So it's always good to see people doing good things and reading about people doing the right things and different stuff. They have language books on here, animals, talk about gardens, help teach kids the alphabet, learning all different kind of subjects for kids, right? And it also has positive images of Black men on there taking care of their children. So that's always good. Books about that and parenting as well. So y'all be sure to check that out, braveandkindbooks.com. And the motivational minute, I have a good one for you guys today. This is a phrase here that I wanted to share with you guys today. It's, I will no longer allow the negative people to spoil all the good things I have. I choose to be happy. So there's going to be a bunch of negative people in your life, but you want to expel that outside of your life and choose to be happy. You want to focus on the positive things in your life so you can be a positive person and have that positive energy so good things can come and gravitate towards you instead of the negative things. And when the negative things do come towards you, you can expel that. So that's my motivational minute for you guys today. That shall wrap up our show. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. We upload every Sunday, unless there's holidays or other reasons that we usually try to let you guys know in a timely order fashion. We're also on Instagram at Counterpoints Podcast, and you will see our socials on the outro as well. And I want to thank everybody once again for listening to us. Do you guys want to say any final things?
Yeah.
I missed something?
Yeah, you said we loaded on Saturday, round 1.
Oh, Saturday. Sorry.
Yeah. And also 2, I wanted to let everybody know we are going to be taking Thanksgiving off. So you're not going to see a post probably until we might have one more episode to drop, and then you'll probably see, you won't see us till December. So We want to make sure that you guys know that. And also, too, on Wednesdays for What's Up Wednesday segment, that's 8:30 every Wednesday on Instagram Live. And yeah, if y'all got a topic you wanted us to talk about, doesn't matter what it is, go ahead and let us know. You can DM us. You can, however you find out how to talk, let us know. Just let us know. Email us, whatever. But again, like Malik said, make sure you tell a friend, like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And also to be good to one another. E, did you have anything else?
Peace, love, and soul grease.
All right, guys. Thank you. We out. Peace.